Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
Welcome everyone to the podcast. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Welcome newcomers to our podcast. We love hearing all the diverse stories about why teachers want to join the Teachers Toolkit Facebook group, and many of those are already listening to the podcast, which is fantastic. There's so much deep and creative literacy work going on in the schools. And this podcast is a very special one. It's a teacher story today, Literacy and the Arts. And we welcome a teacher, Lucy Stinson, who's an early years teacher on the Gold Coast in Queensland. Welcome, Lucy.
Hello.
How are you?
Lucy.
Good?
Good, thanks. Thanks.
And you're a teacher of what year levels?
I teach year one at the moment.
Okay. And you've just, did you do that last year, or is it something new?
Well, I've always been basically been an early years teacher. Done a few different roles with literacy coach and early years consultant and preschool teaching and multi-age teaching. So I've had a bit of a multitude of different things, but early years is in my heart, if you would say.
Yeah, you'd love the early years.
I love that. It's in your heart.
And our teaching struggle today is teachers are often searching for ways to teach effectively so that all children can be included and nurtured in their classrooms. Robyn Ewing in a previous podcast talked about the capabilities of curiosity, compassion, connection and courage as another 4 C's on top of critical thinking, communication, collaboration and creativity in the Australian curriculum. And teachers, I think, it'd be great to see examples of how these other 4 extra capabilities might work in a classroom. And so great to have you on, Lucy, to talk about the things you've been doing in your classroom, and especially about the arts and how that's been a great springboard for what happens in your classroom.
And particularly in literacy. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Lucy, do you develop the arts as in your classroom as something separately, or do you deliberately bring it into your literacy teaching? What do you do?
I think when I go to think about what I need to teach, my first thought is the texts that I could go to that are going to make that do the work for me. And so my natural instinct with my early years background is to have it active and to go to the arts as form of that, whether it be to really immerse ourselves in the images and lots of oral language around that, or whether it be straight into some sort of curiosity situation where there might be a box with something in it, and what could it be? And then that could be the link to a story. So, for instance, when we had the story, which is an old book, which is lovely, Elmer, by David McKee, and we had a box full of patchwork fabrics, and all in the box, and then we said, well, what's this box? And so we had that. I have a curiosity board at the front door that's on the front of the door when the children see each morning, which has the heading about curiosity. And so we said, well, what's in the box? And so then we unpacked the box, which was full of patchwork fabric. And we had actually read a little bit about Elmer as just a quick, shared reading or of that. And as soon as they saw the patchwork fabric, they thought, oh, it's Elmer. Oh. Elmer's box. And so then we were able to sort of do the story again, but not even look at the text because we knew the story, and someone's got these patchwork fabrics which are all joined together, draped over them, and we just innovated a little bit on it, and the person wandered out into the jungle and met someone who knew to say, "Hello, Elmer," and then to come back and do all the things that happened in the story, come back to the circle of children who were the elephants in the herd. And that was sort of deepening our experience of the story. So I feel as if it's just a natural step for children. They forget about the fact that they're doing school learning, and they just get engaged in being involved with an experience.
Yeah.
And
Lucy,
so that's the way I take it.
Sorry, just take us back to, did you say that you have on your classroom door something around curiosity?
Yeah, so I have a thing posed at the front door about be a curious learner.
Oh,
and that I can't, take credit for that. It was a theme that came from a previous school, is that where we had that each year. There's a sort of theme, if you like, to focus our thinking on. And last year's was about curiosity. So I just was already in that flow. So I put that at the front door. So it could be posing a question about that's got a mathematical bend to it, or it could be a very empty sort of one. It might be just clouds with question marks in it. And when we did Thelma as a next text, I did the cloud, the shape of a unicorn. And that's all they needed was the curiosity. Yeah. But sometimes it might be a question. Yeah. So that's at the door.
So it's an intentional prompt for curiosity.
Yeah, and it's a provocation to lead into exploring a text, and whether the focus might be about the character or the story might be the focus might be about the sequence of events. So whatever way I want to go with that, yeah.
And of course that links right back to, the very first sort of struggle we talked about, where, we're really looking for ways to, effectively engage and nurture all students, and those sorts of prompts and provocations around curiosity let everybody in.
Yeah, I think too, it's sometimes, we need to let go a little bit of it being, we're going to do this learning task and this is how you have to do it, because the disengaged children are the first ones to continue to be disengaged. But if a child doesn't have strong oral language and they're not connecting to it straight away in the written format, doing it in other ways through the arts, through visual images and drama devices, they get to connect into it and build up that knowledge. So, I always remember years and years ago, I used to do, I think it was Mrs. Wishy-Washy. So I would turn around with the apron on, and they would know that I was going to, if I turned around with just a simple little thing, no big elaborate dress up, but just an apron, and I was enrolled as Mrs. Wishy-Washy, they were the animals, and I addressed them as the animals and said, "What are you doing over there, you little dirty?" And then we would go back to the text and read what happened in the text after we'd been through some stuff as a class drama. And this little boy jumped up and said, "It's like we jumped into the story."
Yes. Oh, wow.
Oh.
And so, that's to me, the value of drama is that it's that whole body, literally that whole body involvement in the story, because we know that you captivate children when you read text, but this is another way of captivating them, I guess.
Yes. Oh, you can't know how big the smile is on my face right now, Lucy. The story of, that when a child understands, it's like we've jumped into the story, we really know then that we've captured hearts and minds and thinking and creativity and curiosity, but connected to literature being that strand. I mean, it's this huge strand of our Australian curriculum in English, and our involvement and our engagement with it needs to be alive. Yeah,
and I think it's just a very natural way. If you want to do the content descriptor of understanding how characters are developed, talking about character development is very dry, but being a character
Yes.
and enacting it, and not necessarily reenacting it exactly story, but just, maybe even being creative with being that character and doing something that we didn't even know that character could do, but would fit what that character would do.
Yes.
So I think, that's the content descriptor. Understand how characters are developed. So, yeah.
So then when you've done this work, you're, getting to know the book, and then other literacy work comes out of it. Is that what happens with you?
Yeah. Well, for instance, when a sequence I might have followed, so when we did Elmer and we'd had the big book of it, which was the best way for them to, because it's not simple language necessarily in that text, but
No.
the enlarged text allowed them to really be part of that literary language. And so then after the big book, we then got together, and it went for longer than I intended it to go for, but that's how long it took. They worked as partners on a great big piece of chart paper divided into 8 squares, and I gave them little snippets of the key events in 8 squares. And then they worked on illustrating, and I said, you need to make sure that your picture does go with that part of the print, because I didn't want them to sort of muddle in all different parts of the story. I want them to really focus on the idea that those images need to work with that part of the text. And I typed it up quickly, made a couple of mistakes, so that became a job that when I came along and asked them as a partnership to read it to me, so remember I made some mistakes, can you find where the mistakes were, because I left out a word here or there, and there's highlight pen marks on. So that took a few days actually during their normal reading time. We sort of put it aside a little bit, and they worked as a partner reading and making this big story map. Then we had images of the text. We use a Seesaw platform, which is a really, really easy digital tool.
Yep.
So they had all the images from Elmer, and they went and orally retold it.
Wow.
By that time, they've actually, they've been doing class drama work around it. They've been doing drawing about it. They've been reading the key events. And I got a lot of oral language that was really close to the text, but they couldn't see the text. But that was just. And then the next thing we did, so that was sort of into the second week, if you like, by the time we went through all those episodes, they did their own recounts, and that's where it became more and more explicit, because I went through and searched and found and showed them and made a chart with them of the time, the text connectives referring to time. So then they wrote quite a scaffolded piece using those text connectives of time to make sure to sequence through the events. And some I didn't expect to do that. Some I just said you can just write down something that Elmer did, because that that would be overwhelming to do all of it. But there were others who were just on their way, and so they did it. And like there's one little girl, and I actually have it right in front of me, and she wrote down, and this is without seeing the text, just her knowledge she then had. She went, Elmer went back. No one noticed him. After a while, Elmer thought that something was wrong. But what? Same jungle, same sky, same old rain cloud. The elephants were still and serious. So she's just written that down after all those experiences. And it's very literary.
Yes. That's not a retell of and then. That is the language of the story.
So when you find they've had a rich model of language from beautiful books, you find it's really transferring to their own oral and written language.
Yeah, it does. And I think with deliberate explicitness as well, because if I hadn't done the text connectives, I might have got a bit of and then, because I have got since for someone they'll revert back to the and then. But I think it gave them a lot of power for their writing to be able to go, I've got these text connectives that are going to make it sound good. But that she brought in all those other pieces of literary language, and it was around the time we were doing mid-year reporting. So I was able to pull out the child's writing. I had a bit of a checklist about what I wanted to look for in their writing in terms of, our context text model, and also point to the scaffold that I had on the wall, so they knew that they just didn't do it completely on their own, that I had an expectation that they would use those text connectives. And I said, if I hadn't done that, they probably would have written and then and then and then. So the parents realised that there was some teaching involved, but that and they were the first ones to say, oh, yeah, that's really good. And I said, that's literary language, and that's honeycomb. So, it's just a really concrete example of how well children can write once you give them lots and lots of immersion and enactment.
And I think you make the good point that it takes a sequence of lessons to do that. That isn't a one-off. That's a deeply ongoing experience that they have, so that they can get to a very different place than if we were just doing it as a singular one-off lesson.
Yeah, and I think you realise when you do it as a single one-off, you don't get good quality. You get something. And because I've started this week, we've been doing fairy tales, and I started doing character countdowns, and I thought, I've done enough. I've modelled one. I've modelled one orally with them as children in the class. Who comes to this school, and stand up, and if you're a boy, if you're, we got down to the specific, and then I partially wrote one, and then they went away in a quick write and wrote one clue, and that was really successful. And I thought, right, now they'll be able to write one on their own. No. So, they really, that was overwhelming. So I thought, I just said, don't worry, this is your first go at doing one on your own. That's fine. So I think, we could just say, day 2 of week 3, they're writing their own character countdown, and then we're moving on. You think, well, then you're not going to get the result you could get if you give them more time to work through it. Yes. So I try and use a little bit of traffic light stuff with that. I sort of, if I think I want to leave it and just start fresh again another time, or if I want to keep on going, I get a green dot on their work to say, you're green, you're ready to go, keep going. Orange light means I want to wait, I want to have a talk with you about yours. And if I have a red light, I might say, if I give them a red light, it's to say, I'm going to give you something different to do, So, I try and have, and that will happen with, say, that recount, but it won't happen with all their writing, because otherwise they'd always be,
Yes, yeah.
It's just now and then to try and take something through a path. Yeah. But anyway, I think what I'm trying to get back to the arts is the fact that it's not just the writing by it standing on its own. It's all of the other things that enrich it before you get there.
Yes, and the connection between all of these things, that once those different arts experiences are happening within, let's say, a unit, that they build on each other rather than those things just being in isolation. So you've got... Yeah. And I must say, years ago I had kids doing lots of different activities, and now it's more like, it's more of a flow, if you like, and it's more coming back together and seeing where we're going. So, yeah.
So it's almost like a thread going through the lessons, yeah?
Yeah, and sometimes the books themselves are the thread. Sometimes... like just this week we've been building a house of bricks for the 3 little pigs. So then I thought, I'll read The Wrong Stone, because I love that text about what the wrong stone was actually the keystone that made the whole building work.
Yes.
Yeah, and so then I read Sunday Chutney about someone feeling like they're the wrong stone. And then I finished reading Stanley Pace. Now, if I was there next, I'd want to read Charlie Parsley and Phil Barley, because it's that same idea that connects through. And I think flowing from one text to the next can be a way of having connecting idea without killing a book.
Yes. Oh, Lucy, I just want to make that connection too, just how much, as Aidan Chambers talks about us as the enabling adult for our students, making selections about what text will bring to students and how we can connect some of those things for them too, so that not that we're necessarily making the connection, but just by bringing those different books to them, those different rich texts, where they can see, and there's a connection. and theirs.
Yeah.
And it's not that, it's the story just like this, but bigger concept connections like you're talking about, that there is, the cornerstone of a building, but then there's the cornerstone of the person in situations.
And you can take it different directions. I mean, you could go, it depends what sort of topic you want to unpack, but yeah. And it's interesting once you've got that repertoire of books yourself, and then you discover lots. When we were going to do Anzac Day, and there was a nice text, my grandpa marches on Anzac Day, but they're not particularly connected to that because it's not, I don't know how much the children know that. So the first text I did before that was Wilfred Gordon, Donald Partridge, because that's strongly all about memories and how objects help us remember. And, of course, there is someone in there that gets a medal. And so that was my lead-in to Anzac stuff, which was in our beginning of last term, because I wanted to go, what is this idea of memories and how objects help us remember significant events? And, we had the box, we unpacked it. We had everything that Wilfred Gordon had, I had in the box, and we unpacked it. So, that's the sort of the curiosity factor that comes in.
Yes, and the importance of artefacts. You've talked more than once about having artefacts that lead in to that curiosity or feed into it. So having the case of things for Wilfred Gordon, or having the patchwork quilt or the patchwork fabric pieces for Elmer. So artefacts play a significant role in that. So do you ever get children collecting or creating artefacts as part of an...
Yeah, well, in the past, Wilfred Gordon, if we've done a lot more work on it, they've brought in all their objects, created their own memory boxes, and we actually visited an old person's home with little memory things as well. So, so yes, definitely those things. And right now, this week, which is a HAS thing, but I think it's literacy and language, and all the subjects go hand in hand. They've drawn a picture of their favourite toy, and they've written down a bit of homework. They loved me saying, this is your parents' homework, not your homework, it's mum and dad's homework. So they wrote down on the back of their drawing of their favourite toy, and one little boy is really into knowing what blueprints are. So on one side of the page, on one half of their page, they draw on their favourite toy, and on the other half of the page, they did a blueprint of how you would have to make it. And we looked at a book called I Am a Robot, which had all labels, which was like that informational text about pointing to all the parts that you needed to make this robot. So they put the parts you'd need to make a toy. So there was a little bit of informational text next to their picture of their toy, and then on the back, they've written parents' homework. What is your favourite toy? Draw it and label it. And I said, I don't want photos. I don't want mum and dad. I want mum and dad to draw it and label it. And when I said no photos, they went, oh. So yeah, and that's, I'm going off in the sidetrack there, but that's the artefact thing.
Yes, yes.
And I think for me as an early childhood teacher, I cannot think of doing learning without some sort of hands-on experience, whether it be with your body or whether it be with objects or your hands. Because I think objects, people, interactions, they all part of the deal. And I've never been inclined to go to sheets where you fill in all the bits, because it's just not been my style of teaching, if you like, or in my heart of what I feel right about.
So do you think there's children at all different levels of learning, and do you think the arts and literature give everyone an entry point to come in on? Is that? I
think it's just understanding learning, and that's what kids are like. I think back to many years ago. I was really lucky. I did actually through South Australia. Even though I'm in Queensland, I did an extra study and did all these action research things on literacy, language, and numeracy through hands-on experiences. That was sort of the thread I had through a lot of my different action research. And in that sort of work, like Howard Gardner's idea that children are making, and we can't tell when, this transition from these first-order learning experiences, to something more abstract, and they need to keep on having that support of those hands-on dramatic play, drama things to have something that means something to them, because the writing can become very abstract and the symbols can become abstract, but we can make it not abstract if we connect it with
Well, you're
meaning.
making it more alive and more three-dimensional so that they're all getting engaged with it.
There's the fun element. I mean, you can't when kids come on their first day, and it's been my sort of thing. I've had this Grug toy which is looking pretty ragged, and he's been to many homes because he goes for sleepover every night. And when you've had Grug the night before, you get to be a special helper the next day. You do a whole lot of various jobs. But, of course, if you get Grug, you can't do your special jobs the next day. So there's a sort of big incentive to make sure
it comes back.
It comes back. And first day, he's too scared to go to anyone's house. He can't read and write. He's really scared because he's just started grade 1. So they all write to him on their day 1 because you're a writer from day 1 here. And so they write to him and say, "Dear Grug, please come to my house." And I was really excited when someone wrote, because I had book baskets everywhere, and they said, "Dear Greg, please come to my house. I have hundreds of books." And so from day 1 they're writing, and they're really, they know that there's a fantasy. They're not, if you said to them, "Is Greg real?" But we just go with it. They like to have that opportunity.
Well,
to have that.
The imaginative world and creating an imaginative world and creating imaginative young people is part of what we want to be really nurturing and building.
Yeah. Well, we're really not utilising what they've got to bring to the learning. We're really just skating on the surface if we
don't develop that.
Yeah. So I just think all your emotions come into being, and they're positive when you do the drama experiences. And I think I've learnt over the years, because I've worked fairly intuitively, and I don't stress about whether I've got it all right theoretically. I have been lucky enough to have conversations with Robyn Ewing over what I could do with. I did Places You Go, and I said, "Oh, Robyn, how can I do that book through the drama?" So she gave me a whole lot of little devices, and I did them sort of according to the theory of the drama devices, which worked really well. Our kids sculpted each other into characters, and because they had images. But at the same time, sometimes I'll just go with what I feel I can do.
Yeah.
And it's not right or wrong.
No. Because Robyn said, you don't have to be an expert in this drama. You can come in at any level and. Robyn's book's fantastic for an easy way to get going on it in terms of using those devices. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But you can just go, well, you can be a character, and you don't want to dress up and make it like you have to get 100 props.
No.
Yeah. And that, is that book transforming the curriculum through the arts? Is that the one?
No, this was the book called that she wrote with John Saunders, the drama book.
Okay. Yeah.
Which she has a whole lot of literature and workshops around that literature, but then she has other information that to say, you can just understand these resources and apply them to any literature. Yeah. So that's the text I've got. I don't have Robyn's other one, but that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. At the end of Robyn's podcast, we put in the show notes, we put a whole lot of resources that she recommended. So people can go back to that one as well because they're relevant to this podcast as well. So, yep.
Yeah. And I think it's just sort of letting yourself just do it, and then finding out that it can surprise you how it works. When I Possum Magic was such an easy one because it was such an easy connection to literacy skill, because I said, I can't remember what I'm supposed to get, and I was obviously Grandma Poss. And it wasn't hard to be silly old lady. Just going, I don't know what I'm supposed to. I can't remember, and it's her birthday tomorrow, and then someone says, "Oh, we'll write a list." Oh, thank goodness! It took me a while until someone said write a list, but then finally someone said, write a list. So then I had chart paper. So it was, and I think that's a really good thing to have big bits of paper. So there's not like it's neat and nice. It's just, and big pieces of paper work together, and, 3 little koalas all worked over there, and 3 little kookaburras worked over there. And they started writing down what it was that I needed to remember. And so that was, you're a writer, you're writing down what grandma needs to take to the shops to get.
Lucy,
So,
do you see compassion being developed within the children because of the work, this kind of way of teaching?
Oh, I think that, you can read a beautiful text and you straight away can get, the empathy and the understanding of the feelings in it. I mean, I remember when I discovered this year, because I just came across it, The Children Who Love Books.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had been looking for another one by Libby Gleason, just called The Book. I think it's just called The Book, which I love, but I couldn't find it. So then I found this other one. And when I read it, there's almost this hush amongst the children. And they knew that someone said, oh, they feel like they belong together because of the book. And so
wow.
that's immediate. Yeah. But then I think sometimes if you are crying as Grandma Poss that you're really worried about Hush, that's an immediate feeling about how Grandma Poss actually felt, because so, and if they go into role, and there's one little boy this year who wasn't from my class who came in, and we were doing a sort of I forget what the device is called now. But anyway, Conscience Alley. So they were sort of talking to Thelma about what Thelma could think about in her head to come to terms with the fact that she had all these fans. And they had all these little white handprint things I'd given them to hold as fans. So they're all screaming out Thelma, 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 and they're in this little laneway of kids screaming out Thelma. And Thelma had gone away back to her friend Otis. And so this little boy was standing there as Otis. And I said, oh, what would you say to Thelma? And this little boy goes, oh, Thelma, it's okay. You can just be yourself.
Oh.
Sorry about the beeps, if that's coming through. So anyway, so that to me is the drama that just makes the children not just empathise but be the character.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
And that's where, if we ever ask, why do authors write? It always comes back to, and I love that the Australian curriculum has got this in here where authors write, and we read to learn more about the world, ourselves, and others.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what good literature does. That's what it brings to us. It helps us understand more about the world, about ourselves, and about others. And there it is, right in the words of that little man, that Thelma, you would just have to learn to be yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And then that reassurance, and that's from a child who hasn't always get along with others, who has his share of struggles and conflicts.
Yeah.
And there he showed the most empathetic self. So he understood what that character was, but he also understood about the need to be supportive and helpful.
Yes,
But he had the safety of doing it in a story.
Yeah. And so we would say that the arts could really give us the opportunity to practice being some of those things that we might not have had a chance to be in our life.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I guess it's just that understanding of the way children learn best, in the fact that, like if you're doing socio-dramatic play, which is another whole dimension, another whole area to go into, you do lift above yourself. You lift because you're going to be someone else. So you lift out of your level, if you like, but it's safe.
Yes.
So, and I think that's the beauty of, and when children are so engaged, you don't have anyone feeling bad about reading or writing because they're engaged. So that's part of the bonus of it as well. So.
Can I just take us back to one thing that you were talking about before, because I know both you and Robyn have said, that we can really trust ourselves once we open up those, particularly like the dramatic doors, but you talked about, that there are some devices that you would draw on. Would you mind, and you talked about just having, statues and, shaping.
Okay, yeah.
Would you mind just talking about 2 or 3 devices that you would draw on, so that those of us who haven't maybe put our toes in too much into that area would have some things to try out?
Well, when I was doing, this was sort of a culminating thing. We've been doing Dr. Seuss books quite a lot. And I picked out The Places You'll Go as a text that would sort of pull together a lot of the ideas. And so I read The Places You'll Go, and I just did a straight read, basically. Didn't want to stop and talk too much because I wanted to get that feeling of that flow of the rhythm of the language. But then I put up the one image. Before I did that image, it doesn't really matter what sequence I did, but we did Walking and Roll. So we just adopted a character that we'd heard speak or we'd seen in the images, and we just moved around the room, and it was just, that's what it was. We're just walking and roll. And I'm not really expert on all these. I'm very lucky. I have a sister-in-law as well that has a doctorate in drama and education, so I can talk to her, and then I can talk to. I've had lucky enough to talk to Robyn, and the book. So we did Walking and Roll, and then we might have been create a scene. So we were like. I don't know what the name of that is exactly, that device, but it's where you basically are frozen in a scene, but someone could be the house and someone could be crouching in front of the house.
Yes. Yep.
So we could have that sort of frozen scene. And then there's one that they really loved was the sculpting one. So one person is clay and the other person is moulding them into their character, and they move their arms and legs and tilt their head and things like that.
Yes.
But to help with that one, because this was all new, and this was only like a 30-minute lesson with children mixed from different classes, I had a big image on the interactive whiteboard of a particular page in that book of them all people waiting. So there was people waiting at the bus stop, people waiting to catch a fish, people doing all these waiting little scenarios all on one page.
Yes.
And they sculpted someone to look like that, and then I went, oh, you must be the boy waiting at the bus stop.
Yep.
Or, and you must be the lady standing at the toilet door,
Yes.
which I thought was very funny. So we just, and that was really easy, and I fitted those in a lesson, really. And then we did hot seat, which is a really nice, simple one. One person sits, and I model it first. I sit in the seat, and I'm a character, and they interview me, they ask me questions, and I answer as the character. And then someone else picks a character, and they sit in the seat, and we ask that person questions as if they're the character. So I could do those four devices, I think I've said 4, in one lesson. But then we do a little bit of a meta language idea. We debrief. We might sit in a circle, turn one way, then turn the other way, and be back to ourselves, and talk about, well, we've done this, and we've done this, and these are the devices we've used. And I call it devices because you've done this way of working, and you've done this way of working, and which one did you like doing best? Why did you like doing that? So we sort of talk about the actual drama process as well as what they like, why they like doing it.
So they can be as standalone type lessons where you might have those connected to literature but maybe outside of the English block. And then I guess there's times where they are part of your English block where there is.
You would be in a little mini lesson, you might just do a hot seat, because you're talking about a character, pop someone on the seat. Yes. Let's ask this character. And that's it. That might be all you do is a quick little hot seat, or you might, any one of those devices or more, you can just pick up and insert where you like. And one of the things I like to do too, which is not strictly in the idea of using different characters in that way, but it might be just to completely reenact a story that they've loved. So I did Room on the Broom, and all you need is a meter ruler.
We've all got one of those.
But just be careful, you just got to go
Yes.
gently.
Yeah.
And the witch is on there, and I didn't have on hands, and I think you're going to make kids think you don't have to be in elaborate costumes to be in the role. You can just hold a little short ruler in your hand as you want.
Yes.
So that's sort of skill to be able to go into role with just one simple little tiny prop. And so they, each character hopped onto the broom, and then they went down into the swamp. And if I'd had it on hand, I would have thrown a bit of, brown fabric off them, and they could have all stood up under the brown fabric and been that scary one that sent them away. And I can do that pretty off the cuff sometimes. Just go, let's read this story, and I'll just grab someone. Come on, let's do it. And so those things can be just a way to finish the day. Do a shared text, and quickly let's have someone on the broom. Or I don't know if you know the text is probably one of those big books called Rabbit and Rooster's Ride.
No, I don't know that one.
Well, all it is that Rabbit and Rooster. It's very repetitive. Rabbit and Rooster went for a ride, and they go jump jumping, and he went jump jumping, and they said go higher, and so they have a rock he jumps over, and a log he jumps over, and then when he jumps over a river they all fall in the river. And so it's a really simple text that repeats all the way through. And so, we just had somebody, I just had my rock from a different story. I'd had put the rock on the ground. I put my brown drink bottle on the ground for the log, and I threw a bit of blue material on the ground for the river, and I held a piece of material around someone's tummy so that these little rabbit and rooster could be in the kangaroo's pouch. And they could just jump over and do the things. So that's just a really quick recap of the story. But if someone hasn't really been taking notice of what's gone on in that story, hasn't really got that the animals have been in the pouch and jumping over these things, they then get it.
Yes, yes. That's it. Then once you live it, once you experience it for yourself.
Once you jump into it.
Yeah, once you jump into it. Literally.
Yeah, and I do see that it connects, like once kids enjoy that literature through the arts and visual arts as well. I mean, this book I just adore, which is in our curriculum that we need to explore Indigenous art. It's in our arts curriculum. It's in our, we need to make it explicit. My Country by Sally Morgan.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yep. I just love that book.
Yes.
And it's very poetic. So I love to just read it. And when I read it often enough to preppies, even though I haven't expected it, about the third time I pick it up, they are reading it, and it's got such beautiful language because it is very poetic. And then it's got this really rich Indigenous style artwork. And I had the children then go and draw, which is more of a house direction as well. They went and drew what would be a special place for you that would make you feel, good. So, and we looked at all images of natural environments. And so then they went and drew these natural environments. But we drew them with patterns in the style of the Aboriginal artwork.
Yes.
And so we were looking at the elements of the artwork, which is what we need to do in our visual arts. But we're also looking at it how it's not quite exactly what it looks like, and that's the way Sally Morgan's pictures aren't exactly what it looks like. They're meant to be, this abstract sort of representation.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what that culminated in was a beautiful writing around, which was quite scaffold as well, about my special place. So we had sort of these sentence starters about my special place is, and they had to name it. I can see, and they had to say my special place is a river, and so I can see water, and we looked at expanding how you can make it sound better, like I can see sparkling water. So we looked at that. And so I can see, I can hear, and it makes me feel. Which was, makes me feel calm or happy, and then I can care for it by, and they might say, not throwing rubbish in the ocean or whatever they want to, or teaching people to care for the world, or not chopping down the trees, or whatever it is. And that's covered our HAS sort of stuff, and it's been really, and I call it like a head, see and hear things, and your heart, how it makes you feel, and your hands in terms of representing care.
Yes.
So I call it our head, heart, hands writing about special places. But it begins with, a lot of visual arts experiences around Sally Morgan's book, My Country.
Yeah.
So I think it's just thinking broadly all the time about what could you do.
Yes, and the mileage we can get across our day, our week, from either a text, that literature, as well as from the words that are sitting upon the language that sits upon our ear, to the visuals, to the way we can feel it, to the way we can represent it, act it, experience it. Just doesn't happen in one part of the day, but spills into many parts.
Yeah, and I think little children in particular, don't see learning in compartments the way we need to. We need to compartmentalise it for our reporting processes. But, they don't think, because they have to file these things away in their seesaw a lot of the time. They go, what folder is this? So I go, well, we've been thinking about reading, writing, speaking, listening. So what do you think? Oh, it's English. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I sort of don't mind that they don't. I know, officially perhaps they should know exactly what subject they're thinking about. But I think from a point of view of a holistic child perspective, they're just experiencing. And
they're making connections between everything, aren't they, all the time?
Absolutely. And we make those connections. By saying, okay, let's look at the artwork, and now let's think about some good words. It's sort of just one thing leads to the other, if you like, but you have to be quite deliberate with how you take them down that path. It's not just willy-nilly stuff. And, I think there's a place for, I know I've found children who are really reluctant writers. Handing over to a lot of drawing gives them a big safety net and meaning-making that enables them to write.
Yes, and yes. It actually it elevates their writing, doesn't it? Because it
gives them something to hang their hat on.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's very abstract stuff in their head, and they're scared about what letters and words they should choose and get it right or get it wrong. And I had a little boy and it's just this week he's just transformed with his reading as well, which is just suddenly thinking, I'm just reading these little texts. And I said, have you read this book before? And he goes, no. Well, you're just working it all out. But then he was reading, before the holidays, I was just sort of taking a bit of a, easy time the last couple of days. They were drawing in their drawing scrapbooks, and I said, and it'd be great if you wrote a story to go with your drawing. And this little boy was writing, and the next day he said, can we write again tomorrow? And it was like the last day we were packing up, and I'm thinking, he wants to do it even though I'm saying we don't need to because we're packing everything up. And I looked at it today because I hadn't seen it, and it was all, for a little reluctant writer, there was a lot of disconnect between the sentences and the sentence structure. But he wrote a whole, grade 1's tallish book page. They glued in a page of writing paper next to their drawing. And I could make out what it was. I could make out that it was about going to the beach, and there was a brick wall and they saw a shark, and then the shark went to the house. There was a bit I thought, I don't know what he's saying there. But I thought that's a whole page of writing with me not saying, you really need to do that writing. It's just saying, if you want to do a story to go with it, that would be great. And I think that was him having a chance to not feel worried about having to do it right, just right.
I was going to say, Lucy, you get to see the children as they work individually, and you're looking at their improvements. You're noticing over the years that you've been working with the arts in improving literacy that is really having an effect, especially on those kids that are having difficulties.
Yeah, I think if you look at anything, what else? What's a better way to go? Because you can flog a dead horse really with some children, and they get more and more turned off.
Yep.
Because more repetition doesn't necessarily make you better; it just makes you think here we go again. Whereas if there's a chance to innovate on a text so that, you've got a little bit of structure to help you, like it might be going on a bear hunt, change the words, they're going on their own hunt, and then they don't, even if I say you don't need to write yet, draw your picture.
Yes.
And then we'll write, because they're making a meaning, but their drawing's their safety way in. And there's a beautiful article Robyn Ewing put me onto, but I can't remember the person that wrote it. It talks about the scaffolding called the weaving metaphor.
We'll chase that up. Yep.
And anyway, in the weaving metaphor, it's the idea of really sort of rethinking the linear fashion or gradual release of responsibility, instead of that being the teacher that takes the whole step-by-step process. She refers to a weaving metaphor where you really take on board the children's intentions, and that's like the cross weave. So if you imagine going straight down, up and down would be your gradual release responsibility sort of steps, and then the cross weave would be the child's intentions and how you can make that connection. And it's really written from that early childhood perspective, that young children come with a whole lot of knowledge and intentions. And if we acknowledge their intentions and build it into our learning and teaching, we give them more opportunity to be successful.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I really like. We must chase that up. I'd like to read that too. Yeah. And it.
I can't remember who wrote it, but it refers to a weaving metaphor. Yeah.
Really connects with me from that idea of, if we just set a singular learning intention and we don't embed that really with. I like to talk with people about, if we're in our, a readers or writers workshop, that we're talking about what good readers and writers are doing at that time, that we would want to ask our readers and writers, what were you trying to do at this time? What was your intention? What were you trying to do?
Yeah, so absolutely.
And that isn't always going to link to that we said that today it was going to be this, but what were you trying to do? There's many things we're trying to do in those processes. So,
I think
lovely metaphor.
What you're developing, Lucy, is a three-dimensional classroom. We can teach two-dimensionally, but maybe that's another way to look at it, that it's three-dimensional. But we've certainly talked about curiosity today, connections, compassion, and I guess the last one is courage. Do you notice courage being developed in these children?
Well, I think it's on both sides. I think as teachers you have to have the courage to, be silly. And because, once you take that step, you give the children the license to be courage as well, and whether that be by being in role or whether that be by having a go at a word you've never tried before, or and whether that be thinking, well, I want to write down that possum magic, that Hush really needs to have a Lamington, but I have no idea how to spell Lamington. If you've got the courage of that situation is built into it, I think so. And then I guess there's the explicitness about the courageousness of characters being courageous. I can't even say the word now.
But
it's late on a Friday afternoon.
It is getting late on a Friday. But anyway, I think it's the fact that, it's in different, if it's in different ways that you're talking about courage.
Yeah, and I think if you're listening to the children and their needs, then they're going to develop that courage and that confidence, aren't they, to have a go.
I think too, it's that feedback that is beyond just right or wrong.
Yes.
What did you do? And for instance, when they are writing using Die Snowball's list has been really invaluable for me this year, because it's looking at the repertoire of things that children do to be a successful writer, and being aware just how much they do well.
Yes.
But you have to have that bit of courage in the first place, and that's why that's the biggest thing I think for me is, like David Hornsby talks a lot about, if you can think, you can write.
Yes.
And day one, you are a writer.
Yes. And I think you've really helped open up that idea again today, as Robyn did, of that we're talking about students communicating, and whether that's in written form, in drawn form, or acted form, or poetic form, or song performance, whatever form that is in, that we are understanding that what we have to say and what we are thinking and what we know we can communicate with others, and that is what makes us feel valued.
Well, it's what makes us human as well.
Yes.
And I was thinking about like the arts in all its assets. Like thinking about music. The children voted this month for the June favourite book was "Do Your Ears Hang Low?" Because they just love to sing. It's quite a small text that I've got. I haven't got a big book version of it, but they can still see it, and it's often picked up as a Just Right book. They love, and we've got all these different verses. That's the one they love, and I think I probably don't use it as much as I should, because when I was back in my preschool teaching days, always put a favourite song onto a chart.
Yes.
And then you're reading without you even meaning to read. You're not even making a big fuss about it. They just do it because they see it and it's there. And then music, like I often have, I've gone through a lot of tracks that work well where the children write and I say, would you like some quiet music while you're writing? And we often play lots of quiet music as they write. And it's just like setting a scene for being in your own zone. I don't do it during reading so much because it gets a bit too many voices going on with reading. But when it's writing time, and I did it with Year 4s, they love to have some. I pick ones that aren't too bombastic, and ones that don't have lyrics. I just have the music, and they. Like I love the track today. This week I've discovered the theme to Forrest Gump. And it's really pretty track.
Yes.
And they'll play it on the carpet with their fingers, and then quietly go away to their desks and start writing.
Wow.
So, or we'll pack up what we're doing, whatever it might be, and I'll put on a music track like that, and they'll come to the circle and start playing it on the carpet.
I love that idea.
Oh. Yeah, and it's just a way of just sort of zoning out and transitioning. So it works quite well.
What a great thing to share.
So I think sometimes music can be a background to what we're doing as much as a...
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it awakens a whole lot of things within us that we don't even know about. It's the imagination, the creativity, the love of learning, all those things.
It's the power, isn't it? Because when no one tells a child that a piece of music is made for a sad situation, but they'll pick up whether a piece of music has a feeling of sadness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll change. If someone thinks it's too sad, I'll change it. I love the piece of music, the theme of Schindler's List. But one little girl came to me and said, "Oh, that music is reminding me about my granddad." And I went, "Okay, I can change it." But that's the power that we have emotions that come straight from all of the arts.
Yes. And actually tapping into, being aware of, tuning into that, once again, that's what it is to be human. So, bringing this to our students and allowing them access to those kinds of things really builds them and their ways of being able to communicate in many different ways.
Yeah. One thing I did want to mention, because I think it's a resource that I've let go over the years and come back to, is told stories, where you simply tell stories. You say, all I'm going to use is my voice, my face. And if you do a told story, there's a lady called Donna Jacobs Sife, S-I-F-E is her surname, and there's a little story called The Seed. And it is the most delightful story. I heard her being interviewed by Richard Feinler on The Conversation Hour years ago. She's very charismatic. But you hear her and it's not easy. It's not easy. It is easy, I'd rather say, to just retell it, because it's simple. And the kids are just there listening. And then you can talk about it afterwards very easily. but it's a beautiful little story and it's just told. And I think when I was a preschool teacher, it was part of our DNA that we did told stories, we did big books, we did,
Yes.
music.
Yes.
That was just part of it. In 15 little segments, we would just do all of that language and music and movement as part of the routine every day. So I think sometimes I've got to think back to my roots.
Yeah. Well, you know what works, don't you? You know what's engaging them and what transforms their learning.
I think these things are timeless because they.
Yes.
Yes,
that's it. They've been with us forever.
Yeah.
So.
And we just build on those wonderful things that we know work. Anyway, Lucy, I think we definitely want you on again on another podcast because there's a lot more to discuss, I'm sure. But but I thought we'd go on to some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
How do you think you learn to read?
Well, I don't really remember not being able to read, which is a bit tricky because I do remember the little readers. I was in the era in the 60s of those little readers, but we were taken to the library for as long as I could remember. Every Saturday we were taken to the library, and I remember that we weren't allowed to have our own library card till we were 5 or 6. So my twin sister and I had to share our big brothers and sisters cards, and we were so excited when we got our own library card.
Oh, wow.
And so we didn't have money for lots and lots of books, but we read lots of books because we went to the library all of the time. And my mother would say, and she finished school when she was 13, so she wasn't academic, but she said, I think you all learned to read and spell really well because you just read lots of books. And I thought, there you go. That's what Alex says these days. So I think we had lots and lots of wanting to read books and opportunity to read books. And I loved things like, I know, the Magic Faraway Tree.
Yes, yes. I just love the fact that you weren't allowed a library card until you were 5. You don't say.
I can't remember what the age was, but I just remember being super excited that I could have my own library card.
Yes, yes.
Best resources a teacher can have on hand for teaching literacy through the arts or any resources.
Through the arts. Well, I always think a pen and chart paper's pretty handy, but
and music.
And
and drama ideas.
A good book.
I think.
And a good book. Great books.
Sometimes it can be, some bits and pieces, which is as simple as a piece of fabric. I had one time where we had a clue every day in a backpack with a little character that would be some obscure object that connected to something in the book. And I thought I'd just do it for 1 or 2 experiences, but every day so it went on for ages and ages where they wanted what was today's clue. And we'd get at this object and it'd be something connected to text. It could even be a bone to do with a factual information text. And then later on someone said, will you show teachers how you use these different, do these texts. I went back and collected all my objects that I'd put sort of away, and the kids remembered what books these objects came from.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
Powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
So you can just get junk.
Best tips for parents on helping a child with reading, writing at home and perhaps through the arts?
Oh, through the arts. Well, I guess...
Or not, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking things like, the things that you see on Play School, which are really arts-based, a lot of things on Play School.
Yeah.
So take notice of what's worked on that show because it's the stuff where kids get to be active, but they get to just enjoy the language as well. And my brother, who I can't remember this so much, but my mother always says, and my brother's over 60 now, saying, when Kindergarten of the Air was on the radio before TV was invented, he would run around the kitchen on a broomstick, So, I think it's. I know these are old things, but I'm saying that it's just the simple things, and reading with a child in bed.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can beat that.
That's gold.
Children wanting to be in your lap is what makes them readers.
Yes. Yeah.
Best tips, messages for teachers to strengthen their literacy teaching.
Think creatively.
Mm.
Yeah.
And be courageous.
Be courageous.
And be courageous. And I guess, look, if you're being a bit theoretical, is I go to Brian Campbell's Conditions for Learning, and if I can tick off and say, I'm doing some explicit teaching, I'm being systematic without being rigid or sequenced, but I know the way I want to do it. I'm clear about that.
You're covering all aspects.
I want to be mindful in how I do it and the meta language I can introduce, but not mindless. And I want to be, I want it contextualised, so it all starts with meaning. So for me, if you can tick off that what you're planning is ticking those 4 sort of boxes, then I think it will work. Given time, it'll work.
Great checklist. We might get that written down. What do you love most about learning?
The discovery in children, the joy that they have from realising that they've learnt something new.
Yeah. And favourite recent story about learning a child or a teacher?
I'm just going to go back to the one of the little boy who said, it feels like we've jumped into the story.
Oh, I love that one.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks so much today, Lucy. That was fantastic.
Yes, thank you for your generosity of taking us into your world and your classroom and your creativity and your love and passion for for actually jumping into the book and bringing it to life, bringing learning to life.
But also you've got so much wisdom that you've built up over the years that is just being built on, and you're just sharing that now with a whole range of teachers out there who are probably so excited about a lot of things they're going to try out now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, very grateful. Thank you so much, Lucy, and happy days to you and your class. And I know we'll, stay tuned for the next podcast with Lucy. I think there's more things.
More to come.
More to come.
Especially,
you've had many podcasts that have inspired me. I think, can I go and teach with Giselle, please?
Oh, yeah. Isn't she? She's got wonderful.
Yeah. And that's why it's so good to have the teachers' stories too. You know, we love to be able to take listeners into classrooms, and that's what you've done for us today, Lucy, taken us into the classroom and into the early years classroom. Yeah. So wonderful to, I've been jotting down, I think there's a whole lot of tools that you've talked about, just your, even things like your drawing scrapbook. Is that what you called it?
Yeah. It's a little bit fancy, isn't it?
But, they're the tools that sometimes we wonder, okay, what do we need in our rooms? A drawing scrapbook. Why couldn't I have one of those? Or the curiosity chart on the front door, on the door of the room. All of those sorts of things are things that, we're bowerbirds as teachers. We like to know what's worked and
I love
how
that
we can
one
engage.
where the kids were using their fingers to play the music.
Yeah, on the carpet.
On the carpet.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, everyone, today for listening to our podcast, and we would love you to join us in our next one. So thank you, and bye for now. Bye, Lucy.
Bye.
And bye, Sharon.
Bye, Phil.
Bye, everyone.
Till next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.